Hey, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you. Shut everybody in. Well, welcome back. Thank you so much. I did pop over and have a look at the thought wall to see how things were going. Five post-its. And alarmingly, 3 of them were from somebody who works for Anglian Water because they felt sorry for me, so, which is true. So, yeah, just a reminder, please do go and pop some thoughts in there. There must be more than 5 thoughts in this room. Right, so our next session focuses on operational and technical developments with case studies on a range of projects, which range from laying leak-free new networks, to understanding trunk main imbalances, to using smart meter data to model consumption and night use, and how a fundamental review of the basics has thrown a light on a way to gain more insights into DMA performance now and in the future. So lots to get our teeth into. So each of these presentations is going to be 15 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes after each of the presentations for Q&A. So, of course, you can put your questions via Slido, but as I said earlier, it'd be quite good to get questions from in the room. So just be thinking about those as the presentations are going on. So please welcome our first speaker, Paul Ives, Senior Consultant, Leakage and Water Resources at WRC, who's going to update us on laying leak-free new networks. Welcome, Paul.
Cheers, thank you.
A round of applause. It's always good. Get you into the swing of things.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first Leakage conference, first time presenting, so I'm very nervous. Or it's the 10 pints I had last night, not too sure. So I'm here today to talk about a project I've been working on WRC, along with Joe Saunders and Joe Parker, Upward project assessing leakage on new PE networks. Within our industry, our journey has been an illuminating exploration into the world of PE pipes, seeking to unravel the mysteries surrounding why we have leakage, joint integrity, and the overall efficiency of these networks. Throughout this venture, we've navigated through uncharted waters, facing challenges, gathering valuable insights, and uncovering crucial findings. Previous studies have raised concerns regarding electrofusion joints, highlighting a relatively higher failure rate compared to butt fusion and mechanical joints. The distinctive properties of PE pipes, including poor sound conductivity, present challenges in unconventional leak detection methods, complicating the precise identification of leak locations. This project represents a concerted effort to meticulously gather and analyse leakage data. The project represents a concerted effort, I've just repeated myself. By leveraging this detailed analysis, the project seeks to formulate precise recommendations and strategies that promise to enhance the overall integrity and efficiency of PI pipe networks. The inception of this endeavour is grounded in the groundworks laid by the 2010 report, Leakage from PE Pipe Systems, which cast light upon critical concerns pertaining to the integrity of joints in PI pipes. This seminal report served as a catalyst emphasising the challenges encountered in ensuring joint integrity within PE networks, consequently laying the groundwork for further investigations and a deeper understanding of these issues. Our journey in understanding and mitigating leakages within newly installed PE networks has been guided by a meticulous methodology, beginning with an exhaustive data collection effort. We sourced detailed information on these networks' installation, properties and performance metrics from multiple UK water companies. Additionally, a tailored questionnaire was crafted to gather qualitative insights from industry experts, completing our data-driven analysis. Engaging with stakeholders and conducting thorough interviews provided invaluable qualitative data, enriching our understanding of challenges and best practices. Our expedition started with the project team initiating 2 workshops involving all partners, aiming to precisely identify and define the project's fundamental requirements. These collaborative sessions act as the foundational pillars, providing the framework upon which our expedition was built. As our collective understanding evolved, so did the need to refine our approach. Subsequently, the DMA list underwent a meticulous refinement process. This recalibration aimed to enhance our comprehensive and gain a more nuanced insight into the intricate landscape of PE networks. With this recalibrated DMA list in hand, our journey delved deeper into the heart of the project's core. So the initial analysis of the data, as shock horror, the amount of properties is the increased level of leakage. To augment our data set and supplement our data-driven analysis, we meticulously developed a bespoke questionnaire. The instrument was thoughtfully designed to encompass multifaceted aspects of PE networks, covering design intricacies, installation protocols, quality assurance methods, monitoring techniques, and customer supply considerations. This questionnaire was meticulously structured to extract those rich insights. Engaging in insightful interviews with the industry experts representing prominent water companies, these interactions were invaluable, unlocking multifaceted perspectives and invaluable knowledge about PE networks. Through these interviews, we gained profound insights, navigating through the complexities and nuances that define the operational landscape of PE networks. The questionnaire, crafted with meticulous attention to detail, acted as a key unlocking to the troves of knowledge held by the industry, guiding us towards comprehensive understanding and enlightenment in our pursuit of understanding the complex ecosystems of PE networks. These interviews were more than just conversations. They were gateways to a realm of invaluable wisdom, providing us with necessary tools to unearth the hidden truths. So we did have some challenges. The timing of the project coincided with a pivotal period in water industry, PR24. This industry-wide focus significantly strained the availability of resources and attention from water companies, making it exceptionally challenging to obtain crucial information for our research. Coupled with this timing, we encountered substantial data issues, notably the absence of comprehensive evidence from the vast majority of participants of pressure tests and site checks. The scarcity of the comprehensive data posed formidable hurdles. So, key findings. Although amidst the data limitations, we did have some valuable data from Antire, which observed that there was a 10% surge in first-time failures from pressure testing. The conspicuous absence or scarcity of data might seem like a project shortcoming at first glance, potentially rendering it unsuccessful. Yet on closer examination, it reveals a substantial narrative within our industry landscape. It points towards significant shortcomings in our practices, a lack of robust checks or a systematic framework for recording data concerning newly installed networks. This revelation signifies a more significant concern. It implies potential inadequacies in how we evaluate or monitor these networks. Also, moreover, the decline in knowledge and expertise within the design teams amplify these concerns. As complexity grows in network design and installation, a shrinking pool of seasoned professionals exacerbates the situation. The decline in expertise could further contribute to inadequate assessments and flawed practices. Are we facing a situation where the industry is not doing enough to mitigate leakage, or is it a reflection of an industry losing sight of the critical importance of diligent network management? So what's next? A draft report's been completed. This will be peer assessed, full of recommendations and standards. That's it for me. Thank you.
You can't leave quite now yet. You've got to hang about a minute, so you're not off the hook yet. I was just interested to, as you were talking about this, Jez was talking earlier about the Section 19 Iron Mains Replacement Programme, which probably half the audience don't even vaguely remember. But in Anglian, that was a big drive away from, we didn't do much scrape and reline, we did lots of replacement. We put in lots of polyethylene systems, and when you mentioned electrofusion couplings, I started twitching like that, because there's a lot of experience from that. And you mentioned right at the end there a point about capability in terms of people, training and development. And it just struck me, back in the original programme that went across a lot of the water industry, there was a big investment in the skills and capabilities of the teams to do that work at the time, and just before that big programme. And I was interested in, from your sort of interviews, what you've come across in terms of concerns, perhaps, in the industry in terms of where we are at the moment.
I think with the emergence of self-lays, there's a key issue there where are we recording the data, the pressure data, the quality assurance data, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. It was also a bit disappointing to hear about your PR24 experience.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
we had a month of waiting around for data.
Okay.
It was a lot of it was just waiting.
Is there a need to go back round that loop now that we're at a slightly different part of the cycle?
Hopefully, yeah, we've got a little bit more data dripping in, but
okay.
Yeah, hopefully we can get some more.
Let's pick up any questions from the audience. Looking out there at this illustrious band. Any questions out there? Tim.
So I absolutely understand what you're saying about data and collection, the biggest pain at the bottom. Also, when you're looking at PE pipes, how many failures did you actually pick up? Because when you have a pretty resilient material like that, getting hold of enough data can be a problem. Is that a challenge that you face?
Definitely, yeah. It was. We had a few companies shared leak numbers, and it showed most of those were joint failures, as in ferrules, inlets, that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was very slow with the data, so it was quite hard to pick apart that and get a defined reason, definitely.
And Paul, did you have much engagement? You talk about self-lay. I mean, did you have much engagement with the organisations doing the self-lay?
None from self-lay, none at all.
Because that's a big issue, isn't it?
Definitely.
If more and more the industry's moving over to that, we've got to have a different sort of engagement with that group.
There was one water company, they've had an increase up to about 50% of their new developments are self-lay.
Right. But they weren't part of the actual work?
No, I think they were asked at the start, but didn't get involved.
Okay. That's a bit of a gap, isn't it? Thinking about it moving forward. Yeah. Okay. Super. Any other questions from the audience? No, it looks like you're going to be let off fairly lightly. Well done for your first presentation, Paul.
Yeah. Cheers.
So, yes, that's given us some food for thought. What I'd like to do now is to hear from Mikhail Wilmot, who's a leakage assurance analyst at Severn Trent, who's going to take us through monitoring, metering and Monte Carlo analysis and how that can help us understand trunk main imbalances. Is that a long enough title, do you think?
I think it's a long enough title. We'll try to get as much as we could in there.
So, over to you. Welcome. Thank you.
So 20 years ago this day, I was with the Severn Trent leakage team looking for a burst in Melton Mowbray when I got a call from the hospital. My wife had gone for a routine checkup. She was heavily pregnant, and I got a call saying, there's some complications, you best come to the hospital, the baby's going to be delivered by C-section. So we got in the Severn Trent Land Rover. I don't know whether they ever found that burst in Melton Mowbray, but hopefully they did. Got there just in time for the birth. The daughter's okay, the wife was okay, and now the daughter is having the time of her life. She's working as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Norway, and she knows her dad is an absolute water geek. So she keeps on just sending me pictures of waterways, and they seem to have lots of water in Norway. But even in Norway, they need to conserve water. Last year, during the hot summer of 2022, in Oslo, they turned off the water fountains in the city centre. Now that seemed really strange, considering it's recycled water that they keep on using. It just recycles on there. But they did that because they wanted to emphasise the need for consumers to save water. Now, if Norway needs to save water in at least some parts of the place, so do we. Because in England, 15 out of 23 regions have been designated as seriously water stressed. This is Lady Bow Reservoir up in Derbyshire, and it's lovely and full. This was just taken a few weeks ago. But we have a similar problem to what Anglin mentioned and to what everybody in the UK has, is that in 2050, we're going to have a deficit. In fact, by 2050, our deficit is going to be 600 megalitres a day if we don't make changes. And so therefore we do. We need to reduce per capita consumption, and we need to reduce leakage. And one of the ways that we need to focus on reducing leakage is on the trunk mains. Historically, over the last 40 years, we've been looking at DMAs. And going forward, the biggest reductions will still be in our DMAs. But the trunk mains give us a real opportunity. Looking at the AMP7 plans, by the end of the AMP8 plans, by the end of AMP8, 7 water companies will have at least 70% of their upstream network now measured and using flow balances to report leakage. That is real progress. We are moving away from estimation to measurement through metering. However, meters give us some real challenges on there. There are lots of things that can go wrong with a meter, or that can cause inaccuracy or can cause error. In fact, we should remember the maxim that no measurement is ever absolute. There's always some error. Or to put it a little bit more pessimistically, as Plint and Marta did in the mid-90s, all instruments are liars. Now the question is, do meters just have a little error? Is it a fraction of a percent? Or is it huge? Is it humongous? The real question is, do we need to worry about these errors, or do they balance out themselves? So, in Severn Trent, we have started to understand the impact of meter error on trunk main balances through using some simple Monte Carlo analysis. So we have made up a theoretical trunk main zone. It's based very loosely on one of our trunk main zones in Staffordshire. The flows are based loosely on that, except as you'll see, to make it nice and simple, I've rounded the numbers for us. Okay, we have 14 flow meters. We've got 1 flow meter going in. We've got 13 meters coming out of there. Most of them are DMA meters, but we've got a DSR and we've got a large commercial. And what we see is that we've got 10,000 cubes a day going in, we've got 9,000 cubes going out, so very simply, leakage is 1,000 cubes a day. Now, that was trunk main zone 1. Trunk main zone 2 is a carbon copy. It is exactly the same, apart from one small difference. Instead of 10,000 cubes a day, we've got 9,900 cubes going in. So as a result, leakage is now a little bit lower, from 1,000 down to 900. In fact, we made up 6 trunk main zones. Each trunk main zone had 100 cubes less going in, so leakage was 100 cubes less. Now, if we have finite resources, a limited number of resources, and I can only put my resources into one trunk main, and this is all I know, I'm going to put it into trunk main zone 1, because that's where the opportunity is best. That's where the leakage is highest on there. Okay, meters can be pesky little things, can't they? They don't always read the truth. So let's assume that all the meters work perfectly apart from the DI meter. And now let's assume that it's overreading by 10%. That 1 meter has doubled reported leakage. Obviously leakage has stayed the same, but reported leakage has gone on from 1,000 to 2,000. It could work the other way. Let's assume now that all the meters work perfectly, apart from the DSR meter. Okay, that's over-recording by 5%. Now I've reduced my leakage, or the reported leakage has reduced from 1,000 to 775. So this is the impact that meters can have. But the question is, if you say all meters have errors, we need to put errors onto all of these meters. But the question is, what errors do we put onto these meters? Well, thankfully, there are two really good data sources. Utah State University has got some open access data about meter errors on large diameter meters, and it's available to everybody to use. And so I've utilized that, looking at the DSR meters and looking at the DI meters. Also, WRC over the years for Severn Trent have tested loads and loads of our DMA meters. These are meters that aren't broken. These are meters that we just took out to see what kind of errors they had on them. And so WRC provided me with some data for the DMA meters. And I've used this data to do a simple Monte Carlo analysis. So let's just run through one example on there. So here is our trunk main zones again. Okay, we've randomly got the data from these two data sets, and we see at the inlet meter that we got an error of 0.53%. So in other words, that meter, it should be reading 10,000, but it's actually reading 10,053 cubes. And then if we go to DMA-D on there, so this meter is under-recording by 4.99%. So actually 30 cubes are going into that DMA, but the meter is only picking up 28.5 cubes. By the time you've done all these balances, plus and minuses and everything, we come out with an answer of 1,317 reported leakage. In other words, reported leakage is more than 30% higher than actual leakage. Well, that's trunk main zone 1. We did the same with trunk main zone 2. Again, we randomly gave these errors to these meters, and this one comes up with a reported leakage figure of over 1,500, a more than 50% increase on actual leakage. We did this for all the zones, and what you'll see for all these trunk main zones was trunk main zone 2 was the one that came out with the highest reported leakage. Okay, well that's just one simulation, so we decided to do 10,000 simulations and see what we come up with. Here's the result of the first 6. You'll see that in most cases, trunk main zone 1 comes up with the highest reported leakage value, but not always. You'll see the great variability. If you look at trunk main zone 5, it should read 600 cubes a day, but we've got numbers going from just under 700 to almost 1,400. A real variability from simulation to simulation. So here are kind of the results. This is a really busy slide, so let me take it through one step at a time. And we'll just look at trunk main zone 1, because we're just trying to emphasize the theory here. We know that actual leakage is 1,000. Out of the 10,000 simulations, at one point, all the errors must have gone the wrong way, and they must have been really significant, because we got a leakage value of over 3,000. The lowest leakage value we got was 566. But now this is where it becomes really interesting. Out of the 10,000 simulations, 31% of them were within 10% of the true answer. In other words, 31% of them were within 900 or 1,100 cubes. That's quite surprising. And then over the simulations, again, just under a third of them picked trunk main zone 1 as the trunk main zone that we'll go into. Now, why is this important? If I've got my limited resource again, whether it be capital investment, whether it be leakage detection team, this is telling me 2/3 of the time I'm going to put them into the wrong zone. I am putting those resources where it's not optimal. Well, can we improve on that? Well, we can. What happens if we actually know that we maintain our meters really well? What happens if we know that we install them in a really good location and they're installed correctly? So what we did, we got the WRC data and we took out the most extremes, the most extreme positive results, the most extreme negative results. So we got a much tighter set of data, and that was to mimic better meter management. And the results are interesting. We have now more than doubled the chances of getting within 10% of the true answer. And again, we've more than doubled the chances that we are going to get the correct trunk main zone to prioritize on. Well, that's good. And the great thing about that is maintaining, replacing DMA meters is a lot simpler than large meters. But what happens if we could improve large metering as well? What happens if we made those tolerances a little bit tighter? And so we did the same with the Utah State data. Again, we took out the 10% most negative and the 10% most positive results, the greatest errors. So we had another tighter data set. And we see, again, huge improvements. 9 out of 10 times, we are getting a result within 10% of actual leakage. And again, 85% of the time, we are going into, or we are selecting the right trunk main zone. So the chances of going to the wrong trunk main zone have fallen from about 2/3 down to about 1/6 on there. So some conclusions. Meter errors can result in reporting errors and resources being directed into the wrong trunk main zones. In this example, eliminating the most significant DMA meter errors more than doubled the likelihood of the correct trunk main zone being prioritized. And additionally, once the greatest errors from the larger meters were taken out, there was an 85% chance that the right zone would be selected. Now, of course, this is theoretical, and there are some limitations to this. We assume that all trunk main zones were the same size and the same configuration. That clearly is not true. We had limited data sets, and of course, we didn't look at other errors. We didn't look at configuration, or we didn't look at telemetry errors, or things like that. Even with these limitations, the results are so overwhelming that it really does point to us the need to get the basics right, to do good meter maintenance, to do good meter installs. So we have just a couple of recommendations. This isn't rocket science. We heard rocket science this morning. This is about doing the basics good. Okay. ArcQueer came out with a report about 10 years ago about DMA meters, about how frequently they should be replaced proactively if you've not replaced them because of failure. Their recommendation was about every 12 years. Speaking around the industry, some companies do that, some don't, some are a bit haphazard. But that's a recommendation that is worth kind of reviewing on there. And then the next recommendation, and this is really more for the larger meters, so your DI meters or your DSR meters that are hard to replace. Using mini flow balances, like perhaps looking at abstractioning DI and comparing them, doing electronic and doing flow verifications, doing meter audits, all that can help you understand whether you're getting, or most likely to be getting, a true answer on that. Doing these basics are really important because it means that we can then use measurement to find trunk main leakage. It means that we can ensure that Ladybow Reservoir is full of water in the future, that we've got water for our generations, for my daughter's generations, and the generations to come after that. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much indeed. You took me back in time, actually, about 35 years ago. So about 35 years ago, I was a young operational management trainee, and there was myself and a guy called Mark Driver, and we just got into the business, and the then managing director, we bumped into him, and he said, we've got a bit of a problem, we'd like you to investigate. And we went, oh yeah, great, we're up for that. And he said, it's to do with trunk mains, and it's to do with the bulk meters from all of the big treatment works in the company, because we think we don't really know what's going on. So it was 35 years ago. So being young and keen, we went, oh yeah, we'll go for that. So off we went, and we had to go around and visit each of the supply managers of all the big work. So at that particular time in Anglian, these were people who had a lot of status. These were the people who ran the really big assets. And generally they were men, generally they were quite mature men, and generally they hated the concept of young people joining the water industry, and they particularly hated the concept of operational graduates, because we were on the first intake year. And so we then proceeded to go around each of these treatment works, asking the really difficult question, like, do you know where the meter is? You know, that was always a good one. Quite a few of them didn't. When we actually established them, we were absolutely horrified to see how little care and attention had taken place of these key assets, how much confidence people were taking from the results coming out of these meters, where often after a few questions the result changed, and actually how the data from those meters at this time, this was a long time ago, even got translated. You know, it didn't even go to Excel, this was on paper. You know, numbers were, and then you went through and looked at it and numbers were being added up wrong. It was all over the place. So it's always, as soon as you went on that, I thought it took me back. It took me back to this horrifying time, and it was not the best way to make an impression within a water company, that's for sure. Great way to sort of set apart one audience called all the big supply managers against this idea of graduates. But hopefully we've made some progress since then. Anyway, so all good stuff. So how do you see this sort of featuring then in terms of the next price review? How does it feature in business plans? How do you think we could use some of this in the next discussions we're going to be having with our economic regulators around leakage and what we should be focusing on?
So I think there's some really good discussions on this, and we've had it over the last few days. So one of the challenges that we've got, as I speak to different people from kind of the trunk main network, and Atkins run a good trunk main workshop every few months on there, is about this 8-hour window, isn't it? Because what we're finding is that we're often putting in suboptimal metering, because that's the metering we can get in the 3-hour window. Where we had this 8-hour window or this longer window, we can get in something better there. I think the other thing that perhaps helps out with perhaps not necessarily PR24, but PR29, is when we get this data, now we've got to do something with it. The fact that we've got 7 companies getting to 70% metering on their trunk mains, that, I'm sure, will give us some surprises, some challenges, some opportunities on there. And it will likely say, we need that investment, we need that investment. But until we get to that part, Peter, we can't say exactly what investment we need on there. So this is really building up a picture, because it's likely to get messy before it gets better, but we're going to have to deal with that.
Cool. Okay, let's open up to you. So questions from the audience then. Any questions? Oh, it's the gentleman in the front. We've got a couple. So start here, or who was first? Come on. We're going to have to start a fight. There's Jen over here.
All right, Michael. Ken Cartwright from Atkins Realis. I'm going to ask a question. You talk about meter errors
Yes.
and the problems with calculating upstream leakage. Do you think that should stop people using flow balances to calculate upstream leakage?
Absolutely no. Big fat no. It's a journey we've got to go on. As I said, it might get messy before it gets clearer on there, but we need to know that. So the burst and background estimate is probably misleading on there. It's the industry way of doing things, but we all know it's got real big challenges on doing that on there. So I think we need to go through this tricky, difficult, hard course of doing it. We've got a project going on at the moment which 8 companies in this room are part of, looking at the benefits of meter verification, looking how that data can help us knowing what to do with meters and how to replace them. We're doing lots of work about how to install meters so we get most accuracy out of them. So it's a journey that we're on, but absolutely I think we've got to go through the measurement rather than the estimation, even however tricky that might be to navigate that.
Thank you. Good answer.
Okay. Other questions? We said there was one over. Gent over there. So it's at the far end. Thank you. Got you.
Inventing systems. Would it be useful to do this Monte Carlo analysis on all your trunk main network in order to help you to prioritise, to understand whether your prioritisation is working? And have you done that? Is that it?
So the answer is yes and no. Yes, it would be, and no, we haven't. I think what we'd love to do is to get some more extended data sets. So the WRC data set that we've used it had lots of data points on. The Utah State was a little bit more limited on the data points we've had. But again, the work that we're doing at the minute, this club project we've got on meter verification, we should be able to get more data points out of that. We've also done something that is really unique, where we've actually taken out half a dozen of our DI meters, and these weren't DI meters that were failing. So you normally take out your big meters when they're failing, aren't you? Because it's a real pain to take them out. It's a real awkward. So we did something quite bizarre and said, let's take them out while they're working, while we've got no suspicion of them, and see how well they're performing. And so we've done that with half a dozen. About 5 of them are within about 2%, so we're fairly happy. And these are meters that have been in, some of them 5 years, some of them 25 years. And then there was one that was quite a ways out on there. So I think we need more of that data in order to do that Monte Carlo. We can do it with the data we've got now, but to make it more robust going forwards. Because I was amazed when I saw these results of how variable the results were, how changeable they were. And suddenly I understand why we sometimes get zones with negative leakage now. And this was just looking at metering. This wasn't looking at all the other configuration problems that we have. So the answer is no, we haven't, but yes, we probably should.
Okay. Other questions? There's an observation just come in that, some in the audience feel it would be helpful to share this particular presentation with Ian Pemberton. I don't know if Ian's here at the moment. He's going to be here later on. But there was that question he posed yesterday, is leakage an estimate or a calculation? And somebody suggested that maybe your presentation would be a good thing to share. But any reflections?
I would love to share with Ian Pemberton. Not a problem. Not a problem. Absolutely. Especially if he gave us a bit more money.
Jez.
Yeah, Jez from SES. I have to say it, but...
You're on the bingo card, everyone's tick that one off.
So no, interesting. Let's go back on the background leakage conversation as well.
Yep.
So we know that one of the issues with that is whether it's actually in the calculation, whether it's not actually background leakage at all, and we're trying to understand those.
Yep.
Do you feel there's a way that we can take the analysis that you've done at kind of far more at a trunk main level and then start to bring that down into the DMA levels? Basically, the point behind it at the moment is we're going, we don't know whether it's small, lots of small, a few large we can't find, or a calculation. And really what we need to know is what's the most likely. Would your analysis help us at that kind of level to start to get a likelihood?
Yeah. I think it would. And let's move it one step. Let's go into the DMA, okay? Let's pretend this is a DMA. Let's pretend we've got a fully metered DMA, okay? 100% metered. It's really interesting seeing some of the revenue meter under registration that we've got, and sometimes over registration, goes both ways, and how they vary. And I was looking at some data just a few weeks ago, and I'm thinking, we are really struggling to get a water balance in a DMA that we've got huge confidence on because of the meter under registration thing. So I think background leakage, at least part of it, could be in the calculation, but this principle you could put into a DMA, and again, see what you come up with, see what a variety of answers. Stuart can't wait to get his point. To see what a variety of answers you could get on there and see how wide that would be. As I said, this surprised me. I think it'd be interesting to go into a DMA and do a similar thing where you would have hundreds of meters, not just a few meters, and see whether they balance off or whether you... I think you'll get a real range of answers on there.
Haven't turned around yet, but does he want the mic?
Yeah, I didn't mention it yesterday, but that is one of the work streams in the Managing Background Leakage project. We, as a team, we haven't yet discussed how we're going to do it, but we are going to look at what impact meter error has on the estimate of background leakage in DMAs. So we'll be doing the sort of thing that you've done on the trunk mains within the DMAs. What
would be lovely to do, and cost might be the challenge to do this, is to actually go through a DMA and take out as many meters as you can do on there. Obviously there'll be some engineering challenges to take out some of them, but again, just to get an idea of what was the average error, how much did it vary on there. But yeah, I think this is one of the things that we could look into to help with that.
If the water companies participating in the project are willing to do that, then that's something we'll consider, Michael.
Yeah.
Great stuff. It just struck me in talking about metering and metering accuracy. We do quite a lot of work with a Spanish water company, and they were absolutely astounded to realise the relative lack of testing of meters that goes on and the amount of testing that they do across a wide range of meters that we routinely use, and some of the results they find, which are quite different to perhaps what you might expect. So it's definitely an area, and there's a question in here, is 2% accuracy for a new meter acceptable when gas and oil have meters accurate to 0.01%?
So it comes largely down to cost, if we be honest on that. That's what it comes down to. We could get a lower error if we wanted to, but the water bill on average is less than half what it is for the gas bill. And again, whether we're willing to make that trade-off, because the answer is we can get there. It all comes at a price though, and it's whether we're willing to make that.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from the audience? No? I think you've done your stint then. Well done.
Thank you
very much.
Peter.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed for those insights. So I'd now like to invite up Axel Rendell, Water Balance Process and Leakage Reporting Team Lead for Thames Water. And he's going to give us some insights into ways in which Thames have leveraged their smart meter data to lift the lid on leakage through modelling, consumption and night use. That's a better and shorter title than some of the others, so well done for that. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm telling you about how we've been working on modeling consumption and night use from smart meter data in the aid of trying to lift the lid on leakage. So over the next 20 minutes, I'll give you a bit of context, why it's important. A lot of people have talked about that already, but I'll give my own spin on it. Tell you a bit about how we've done the work, some of the results we've seen from that modeling, some of the lessons learned along the way. And I'll talk you through two applications of how we're starting to use it to drive insights, and then hopefully leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So why are we here? Others have mentioned it. Peter put it in context this morning as well. We have that deficit, and as part of meeting that future deficit of water supply, we're going to need to reduce leakage. And so 20.5% is Thames Water's leakage reduction target, this AMP. We're also on the road to 50% by 2050, right? So that presents a big challenge in and of itself. On top of all that, and this actually builds on what Mike was telling us about the inaccuracies in our instruments being liars, that as leakage becomes a smaller and smaller proportion of our flows, you're going to get a smaller and smaller signal-to-noise ratio, basically. So where instruments are liars, and that's a problem that Mike's been working on, I'm going to talk a bit about how modeling also requires better precision in order to get at it. And put it into context, Thames Water has more than 50% of our night line is night use, and that's only going to grow, meaning that leakage is a smaller bit. So the noise from all those other components that we use to derive our leakage figure is going to start overwhelming that unless we get better precision in our modeling. The good news is we've got now over 800,000 household smart meters that are giving us annualized over 7 billion reads, meter reads. So we can use that, and I think that shows loads of potential. So taking this opportunity to share some of these results, and hopefully we can collaborate and share some ideas as well. So we've been on a journey rolling out smart meters for several years now. We're expecting that to continue through into AMP9 actually, and will be, what you've got here on the graph is by different property types, flats and small blocks, flats and large blocks on the end here. The proportion of those meters that are smart in dark green, analog in the light green, and then yellow are unmeasured customers. So what you can see is about 18% overall of our households are smart metered. Now, we don't want to wait until 2035 to start using this information, when our rollout is complete. So what can we do in the meantime? And realizing also that some of these unmetered customers will never be metered. It's just not practical or economical to meter them. So what do we do about those and understanding their consumption and usage? So we asked ourselves, can we model non-smart customers' usage from our smart meter data? Yes. Okay, so here's what we've developed basically is dynamic consumption and night use allowances for 30 different cohorts. Those 30 cohorts comprised of the 5 property types that showed on the previous slide, as well as demographic distinction between ethnic groups, but that helps us to determine basically the likelihood that a customer will be observing Ramadan, and then also the distinction between metered and unmetered customers. And so what I'm showing here is the night use figures for 3 of those cohorts, just to give some comparative examples. And what you're seeing here, these are daily values, and you start to notice very clear weekly patterns of spikes on the weekends when customers use more or they tend to stay up later. You see different seasonal variability. So the orange line here is our detached properties. And you see they have clear summer response, where customers are watering the gardens. Now customers without a garden, and like our terraced houses in the gray line, don't show such a large response. It's kind of expected, but it's neat to see it, right? We see seasonal events. We see New Year's Eve this year and last year. We see the freeze-thaw impact on plumbing losses. We see Ramadan very clearly for terrace houses again, but within the group that are likely to be observing Ramadan, we see very clear Ramadan responses. And this is quite a neat one, actually. That's not a data error, by the way. That's just the effect of the clocks going forward between the first week of Ramadan and the rest. So that you start to see features here, and you might ask yourself, what is that? But often there's an explanation. This one, however, it is the data error. So we're also quite susceptible to that. So that's a neat learning as well. Okay, so what are some of the things we've learned from doing this? One is that the sample size really, really matters. So in 2018, our detached properties, we had about 1,000 of them. And what you've got there is the top left graph, the blue line showing daily usage, the orange being the night use. And you get a signal. You can see a clear seasonal trend there going up over the summer. But fast forward 5 years, 2023, we've now got 12,000 in that sample. And you get a much less noisy signal, right? We can start to just see clear weekly patterns. We can start to pick out actual features from noise. And so taking from that learning, we look at how similar cohorts might be combined. So on this line, basically, we've taken that orange line here is the blue one here. So, right, we've got our detached properties that are measured. The overlay, the orange squiggly line here is the unmeasured. We've got much fewer of those, about 2,000. But when you look at it from a distance, you realize they're showing broadly the similar pattern. So might there be a trade-off there to be made to say, let's use a combined cohort, reduce the noise, and still get a reasonable estimate for what they as a combined group are using? But we're only realizing that as we're diving into it, right? So this is sort of relatively fresh learning. The final thing I want to talk to you about is how we deal with continuous flows. So I think it was, we've been using smart meter data to inform our weekly reporting on leakage, and particularly week-on-week movements. It was about this time last year that we realized we'd really drifted off, and we compared it to a quarterly water balance we'd run up to the end of September, and we noticed the results were quite different. We thought, what's going on there? What we realized was, and Dean talked about this yesterday, of course, when you install a smart meter, you reduce continuous flows. So wastage and CSLs tend to be dealt with more quickly. So we see about a 50% reduction in continuous flows on a smart metered property. And we hadn't accounted for that. So we started to see a drift. And so about this time last year, we recalibrated our models. We figured out a way to account for continuous flows by basically flagging up if we've had a smart meter that hasn't dropped to zero over 7 consecutive days. We say that's a continuous flow, and we take it out. And that's that orange bit here. We could remove that, and you're left with this clean green profile of our non-continuous flow. And we can add a bit of an allowance in for wastage. So we patted ourselves on the back for having done that. A few months went by. We realized we kept getting this odd adjustment on the previous week. Every time we reported 1 week, last week's number had shifted. And it always shifted in the same direction, up, which is very unhelpful. And what we realized was, in being really clever about removing the continuous flow, we hadn't realized that there's a bias in the last 6 days, which haven't yet, the continuous flows that appeared in that last week haven't yet flagged as a continuous flow, so they weren't being excluded. We were over-accounting for night use, and so leakage was understated in that last week. We've corrected for that now. We're patting ourselves on the back again. We'll probably learn other things like that too, but it's just one of those examples of we're learning as we go, but we have the license to be fairly innovative with some of this stuff because they're still relatively small movements, and we calibrate them on a quarterly basis. So let me talk about some applications. This is a sort of typical night line leakage calculation model where we take the night line in orange here. You see the typical features. Again, the summer increases, Ramadan. And then we've used all that smart meter data, those 30 cohorts, multiplied them up, extrapolating by the different property counts to give us this pink line, which is our household night use. For this particular model, we actually tried using a local sample. So rather than taking all of London's data, we say, let's use the more geographically local ones and see if they give a better fit. And when we compare it to the night line, it does. So you see actually very neat matching of sort of magnitude of Ramadan, for instance. Similar thing for the non-households. We use smart meter data there too. He in this case, extrapolating by build volume and adding continuously logged customers. And what you're left with when you subtract these two lines from the night line is this dark blue residual. And we were quite pleased to see how smooth this is. And it shows all the typical features you'd expect. I mean, it's not leakage. We haven't removed all night use here. But the biggest components have been removed. And you're left with a clear rise in the summer, last summer, which was hot. We saw the strong freeze-thaw response. And again, mini freeze-thaw in January as well. And then the gradual recovery that we've had since then. I've got a light blue line on there. That actually comes from this next top-down analysis that we did. So similar principle, we've got total daily flows instead of just the flows between 3 to 4 a.m. And you see clear features. An interesting thing here is because we're using, effectively going from 1 hour to 24 hours, you get less noise again. So these are cleaner signals from that perspective. And doing a similar thing of subtracting the household consumption, non-household consumption from the total daily flow, you're left with this light blue residual. And I plotted them, both that and the night line, or the night use residual, on the same graphic, because you can see how closely they tally up, and that's kind of reassuring. But I think there's also something to be learned where they don't match up, and what shape is left in that residual. So are we maybe missing some commercial demand in there? Does it look like it dips on the weekends? I don't know. So another application, we've taken all of those allowances that we've derived, and we've started feeding them into NetBase, which we use for leakage targeting. So before we did that, we had this gray line, which is the sum of all the DMA leakage across NetBase. And what you see is apparently leakage was really high during the last 2 weeks of Ramadan, and also during the summer. We knew that wasn't real, but we were using static allowances. They were sort of company averages, they were static, and they weren't able to deal with those seasonal events and changes in customer use. But by plugging in, we do now a weekly update. This is only about a month ago that we started doing this. We start feeding in daily allowances on a weekly basis, and we're left with this green profile. So that's the sum of our DMAs, much smoother. It's a much lower water balance residual when we do that water balance check. And we find that actually where we were previously ranking our DMAs to say which one do we go to first, out of the top 80, 45 of them fell out. They were false positives effectively, or they didn't have as much as we thought in terms of opportunity, and another 45 came in. So now we know where to look. That's really powerful insight for our operational colleagues. We also get better alignment with how we report from a regulatory perspective. So at Thames Water, we like to do things differently. So we use zones to report our leakage to our regulator. And we can now compare the two. So now you say, oh, we got two versions of the truth. That's scary. That can actually be quite a powerful thing. We've got two different versions of independently derived results. And we can interrogate that. We can drill into it. We can look at it locally and say, well, why don't they match? That is a more interesting known unknown than the unknown unknown that we were operating in before. So hopefully I've convinced you we can use smart meter data to gain some powerful insights about customer usage. Shown that there are some trade-offs to be made between minimizing noise and adjusting for bias. So a larger sample, you get less noise, but you might just be blurring the picture and biasing your sample versus the rest of the population. I've shown a couple applications in terms of reporting and operational targeting. And hopefully you come away from this, the old aphorism that, perfection should not be get in the way of good enough, basically, and starting to push stuff in, even though we have incomplete data, we don't have 100% coverage, we know that there are gaps and flaws in our models. Putting stuff out there and starting to test it, we can learn a lot more from it. And the idea that having a second opinion gives you an opportunity to spot those errors, spot issues, inconsistencies in your models or in your data, and thereby drive continuous improvement. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, so any questions from the floor? I'm going to kick off with one. Actually, as you were presenting, one of the things you talked about was the commercial. That could be commercial. Do you think that's a gap in how we're all thinking about this at the moment? So just think about the data sets, the non-household retail market and the ability to flow data in?
Yeah, there will be, it's an opportunity there too. It accounts for a smaller portion of our total flow, but night flows is quite a large proportion, as you could see, just in terms of how much of the flow that was in there. Yes, it's a challenge also in terms of the quality of those data sets. So when we're extrapolating, instead of using 30 cohorts, we've got the groupings that are given to us. A lot of those commercial customers suspiciously fall into the other category. I think that's the largest single category. Mm-hmm. It's probably not good enough for us to be able to make a meaningful extrapolation. So, or it's not as good as it could be. We can clearly make a meaningful extrapolation, but it might be one where we're missing the trick, basically.
And one of the questions coming through Slido, what's the ratio of smart metered properties per cohort of house type?
I think I might refer back to the graph on that one. I think that's, if I've understood the question correctly, that's basically this. So by cohort, I haven't got those figures to hand, but you can see that our terrace properties probably have the largest. About a third of those are covered. Detached properties has probably one of the lower end. Not mentioning flat spots. So for regulatory reporting, we're also using SAMs to help us with our blocks of flats. Mm-hmm. Yeah, have I covered that question?
I don't know if anybody wants to put their hand up. Gentleman back, was that the question? You asked the question.
Dale Hartley, Clara. Thanks, Alex. I was wondering if the data that you're importing the smart data into is on-premise within Thames, and if not, how do you overcome the GDPR issue?
I believe it is. So we still need to consider GDPR in terms of how we handle that data. Clearly, there's sensitivity around how we classify our customers. We're doing it for legitimate reasons to understand usage. And so one of the things we do to consider that is the way we extract data before it goes into any analysis. So this is hard-coded into the systems themselves, is it gets aggregated to a point where you couldn't pick out an individual customer, but you're understanding trends across the cohort. So the way it comes out of our system is at a cohort level as opposed to an individual.
Okay, thank you.
Super. There's a question here, thank you.
Hi, Dean Marsh, Artesia. Really nice presentation, excellent. I've been promoting smart metering for decades, and it's nice to see it finally land and get some really useful data. Have you any plans for making that data accessible to customers, either non-household or household? And this is a question somebody asked me yesterday, because they're a Thames customer. But how long will that be? Because I think this is really powerful for changing customers' behaviour and that sort of thing.
Yeah, agreed that there's a lot of potential in it, and I think putting it in the hands of someone who can make a better decision on the back of it is the key step here when we're thinking about operatives, but equally for our customers. Yes, I believe plans are in the works. I can't give you a timeline for that. I don't know, but I agree that it is important, and I think as non-household customers working through retailers, that is an available service, I believe. But yeah, we'll be working on a way to make it available to household customers as well.
There's huge opportunities, aren't there, for sort of creating competitions and gamification in this space. And certainly that's been a lot of our experience in Anglian, that you can create some very different sort of dynamics and really drive consumption down off the back of this sort of stuff. I'm not sure if you said this exactly, 2 different versions of the truth. You might have said that. Yeah. That's kind of what I heard.
It makes people win. So
and it kind of leads into this next question. When do you think we'll use smart meters to drive regulatory reporting?
We're implementing it this year, is our intention. So we want to use this smart meter data from AR24.
Fantastic. Okay. Any other questions in the audience? Tim.
I have another question. Tim Farewell, Maple Sky. Uncertainty. In your experience in the industry, what's the sense you get? what's your sense of how comfortable the industry is with uncertainty in data, and do you have any good examples of best practice showing, you know, where people have communicated that uncertainty and that's led to a good outcome?
Yeah, I'd say that we're not comfortable with uncertainty, right? And sometimes we would rather not know. We're more comfortable with the unknown, you know, remaining unknown. And then we say, look, here's a different version of the truth, and it tells a different story. And then we say, oh, which one can I believe in? So I think we're trying to break down some of that, and I guess build up a little bit of confidence that you'd rather know, and you'd rather be able to interrogate it and find out. Sorry, did I capture the second part of your question?
So the second part of the question is, in your experience, do you have any examples of where you've seen people doing, you know, communicating that uncertainty really well?
Not off the top of my head. I guess we're trying to do that as well and put it out there in some of the stuff we're doing here. Yeah, I'm open to thoughts and inspirations from others as well, because it's something we're you know, challenged with at the moment, for sure.
It's interesting to me, sort of reflecting on that question. If you go back in history, in sort of regulatory reporting, there was a period of time where practically every bit of data that you put in had a confidence grade around it. And I forget exactly how it was ranked, but you basically put the data in and then it said, well, you know, you can have a C or a D or an E. And actually, I think the loss of that has been a big shame, because we look at numbers and we say they're absolute numbers, and that number compares with that number. But in this space, it's always been the case that there's going to be a different confidence around those numbers, almost inevitably. And so I think to me, that was a retrograde step when that got taken out of regulatory reporting, because it kind of assumed there's only ever one answer and not a range of errors that build up, as we've been seeing all the way through here. But
yeah. Dean Marsh again. I'm just going to come back on your point and possibly help Axel out here. I think one of the interesting things we've seen on this journey with your smart metering from 2017 to 23 is that initially you start with some really small samples of smart meters, and we constantly saw in those first few years some quite odd results, quite extreme, and what we're really seeing then was uncertainty manifest itself in a bias of the sample, and over time, and you illustrated that, I think, with the smooth, you know, how the curve smooths out, but you reduce the overall the random uncertainty, but you also eliminate some of those biases, and it's really interesting to see that journey and how things are settling out as you get up to, you know, 800,000 plus meters feeding back every day, which is quite impressive.
yeah. Super. Question over there?
Steve Toombs, HWM in Venio. You mentioned that this work resulted in a complete reordering of the DMA, prioritisation of DMAs for leakage.
Yep.
That probably holds quite a big lesson for the confidence that other people are going to have in their DMA prioritisation, doesn't it? Do you want to expand on that? Explain what happened?
Absolutely. I think it would, in particular, if as a company you're prioritizing DMAs based on the absolute amount of leakage. A lot of the time, the leakage detection effort goes into where you see a movement in the nightline. That's been the default. We haven't had a better option, basically. You can't trust the absolute amount of leakage derived, but you can see if it's jumped up over the last week and you jump on it. So I think this is, so behaviors have you know, been molded around that. With a new paradigm that you can actually look at the derived leakage and trust it, you might start prioritizing your interventions differently.
To prioritise on absolute levels and therefore go for very long-term high leakage DMAs, which you wouldn't have been able to do confidently before.
That's right, and we might dispel some myths around long-running background leakage, or see that, you know, actually there's more here than we thought. But again, you'd rather know.
Super. Thank you all very much. Let's have another round of applause. Fantastic. So now for the final presentation of this session, I'm going to welcome Mark Shepherd, who's a product manager with integrated water solutions at GWF. And Mark's going to explain how revisiting fundamental leakage basics can give us more insight into current and future DMA performance. Welcome, Mark. Good to see you.
After everyone, thank you. Can you all hear me? Michael? Okay. So I'm going to go through a number of things, covering quite a few things I saw today. I wasn't here yesterday. So Stuart, you're going to have lots of questions after this one. But I'm just going to take you through a bit of the fundamentals of leakage. Okay, so if you look at what's happening in innovation at the moment, we have a couple of things happening. We've got what we expect as performance over time. Okay, so we have what we call sustaining innovation, which is what the companies are doing. This is your step by step by step, kind of incremental things. You're now getting this new kind of trend towards breakthrough innovation. You know, off-water funding, a lot of work that's happening in there. But if you look at those 2 points, they aren't starting at zero. Okay, so there's an area down there that we often overlook. So there's a lot of research now. You heard Sheffield talking, Stuart's background leakage project, but there's what we call the basic kind of principles of leakage. We often overlook them and we take them for granted, and we don't actively interrogate them and understand what they're telling us. So there's another type of innovation now called foundation innovation, which would be something like what the UBL kind of questions, looking at research into failures of cast iron pipes, etc. But we now need to look at this thing, reinventing the basics. Okay, we've always taken them for granted, and the industry has moved forward on that basis. But we need to look at it. We need to almost deconstruct what we take as granted and reconstruct it again to see where it's taking us. So there's a picture. I was very fortunate to be the project lead on the city of Cape Town when they were facing their day zero crisis. So that's a picture of the main reservoir or dam that supplies Cape Town. They had a countdown clock, going down to there's so many days left until we ran out of water. So that was, I'm putting it up there just to show you what basics can actually do. So there's a trend of Cape Town's kind of production volumes going up to the drought period. So you can see it slowly going down, slowly going down. The first kind of 3 peaks you see there, mainly due to managing the customer demand. And then when you get after the 3rd peak, you start looking at, we're now trying something different. And we essentially flatlined. So you look after the 3rd peak there, we hit a flat line. Okay? Situation didn't get better. We were still heading for running out of water. All right, so let's look at that little area there. So that's when my company was appointed to actually go and sort out the issues in Cape Town. Okay, so I'm going to take the area and blow it up a bit now. So left-hand arrow, that's where we started. Okay, we did absolutely nothing for 3 weeks. Nothing. To the point of getting a termination notice from the client. Okay, because nothing had happened. When we started working though, okay, and we got the data that we needed in terms of taking this forward, we reduced the demand by 52 megs a day in 5 weeks. And that was by getting the right information, interpreting correctly, and knowing what to do. Again, just simple basics of leakage. Okay, so it's possible. A lot of people think Cape Town meets its targets because they drop pressures down to bare minimums. Okay? Yes, they did in some cases, but a lot of cases they didn't. We actually managed to keep pressure up, but we knew what to do where, okay, based on analysing what we had. So, how we did it. A lot of research went to a couple of years before then. Okay, so what I'm about to show you was basically trialled through this Cape Town thing and since then. So if we said to you, we have something that's really simple, very accurate, very reliable, that kind of points you in the right direction to drive your leakage down. Okay, and everything I'm going to talk in this presentation is DMA level. Okay, I'm going to get down to, that's the most granular that we're going to talk. Okay, get your people in the right place. Okay, so send the people where you want them to go in the right order, or the priority. Okay, make sure they're doing the right things. So don't send an ALC crew out if you're not going to get the result that you want. Don't send a PM, or don't go and do pressure management on zone if you're not going to get the result that you want. Okay? So you want maximum impact on your leakage reduction to meet your target or hopefully beat your targets. Okay? So a decision support system that you can look at something for practitioners. Use data science. I don't like the word innovative, Jeremy, sorry, but we're going to look at innovative data science just based on years and years and years of research. Go back to the days when Stuart Troy had hair and he was a bit younger. Okay, 1994, when concepts such as FAVAD and BABE and those things all came into play. All right? That's where we started. You can get a lot of information, okay, out of a zone with actually very little effort if you know what to look for. Okay? And then you can, what you can do is been successfully proven. Okay? Cape Town was our big test. We've done proof of concepts for quite a few water companies in the UK in terms of doing things. So we know this works. Okay? We know the impact it can have. So who uses it? Asset managers. I'll show you little pictures now. Pipe replacement. Okay. DMA level. Okay. We can give you an overview of reticulation health. Okay, and we can tell you where the problems are. Is the problem taking place on a main? Is it taking place on a service connection? Okay. Leakage management strategies, okay, and your reporting. It can help you with that. We measure DMA, so we've got good measurements. You get accurate leakage figures. Okay. You can refine your leakage reduction activities, so again, you know what to do, all right? And then smart metering, just spoken about now. If you could strip out customer-side leakage from what you have, your nightline and everything else, that's going to help you prioritize your smart metering programs. Okay, all of that, not that difficult to do. All right. So, 3 measurement points in one DMA. That's supposed to be a picture of a DMA. I don't know why it's not. Okay. Anyway, we can do a 45-minute test. So going back to old school, 45-minute pressure drop test in DMA. Doesn't have to be a lot, a couple of meters. Okay, drop the pressure, bring it back up again. What is that going to tell us? Okay, we can turbocharge that information. Okay, really simple, but we can turbocharge it. What can we get out of that? Okay, actually a lot of information in terms of data to analyze. We can validate the leakage volume. Okay, we can tell you what type of volume, what type of leakage you have. So that's going back to the old FAVAD principles. How much is fixed area leakage? How much is variable area leakage? You can calculate that. You can work the minimum level you can get down to. So conversation, background leakage will come up just now. Okay, we're all working with the unavoidable annual kind of real losses, UARL. Okay, but we can get down to a number. Okay, which is your maximum recoverable. We can recommend the best intervention to go and hit that target. We can work out customer side leakage. Okay. We can calculate unmetered consumption or unmeasured consumption, and we can verify your night use factors. Okay, and we can look at the basically, in some cases, why you've done something and it's not working. So if you've done pressure management or something on the DMA, it's not giving you the results that you're getting. You can figure out why. Yeah. So how we do it, just very, very quickly. Review the DMA. We'll do this little pressure drop. We interpret the data, so we look at what it's actually telling you. Okay, we never take anything for granted. You don't, whatever spits out, what you tell your kids nowadays, whatever you see, you don't believe. Okay, go into analyzing and interpreting and just using engineering hydraulic principles to say, is this right, is this wrong? Okay. Now, this is something that we need to look at quite carefully, is when you start looking at nightline. We had just a conversation just now about nightline. There's quite a few things that influence it. So we have our night use, or our assessed normal night use that comes into play. We've got customer side leakage. At the bottom, we've got our unavoidable and our background leakage. And then with our orange block of unreported leakage. Okay? There's an overlap with customer side leakage. It falls somewhere between night use and reticulation or kind of reticulation side leakage. If you can do what we call iterate until equilibrium, okay, it's quite possible, because we can get, on our next step I'll tell you how we can confirm a night use factors. If you can do something called iterate to equilibrium, you can get a CSL value which is pretty confident. Okay, it'll be within 95% in terms of a confidence level. It'll be good enough. Won't be exact, won't be to the level that Thames have done in terms of the detail, but you'll have something which is relatively accurate that you can use across DMAs. People often forget this little one called the N1 factor. So I don't know if I have to ask this question. Stuart, how many people know about an N1 factor? Hands up. Okay. So leakage practitioners should know N1 factor backwards, okay, in terms of what it does. All right, you've got to understand the power of this number. It's incredibly powerful. So it's got ranges, it's got caps, absolutes, 0.5 and 1.5. If you go back to the old FAVID principles, okay, 0.5 is your fixed area leakage, 1.5 is your variable area leakage. There's Ofwat's recommendation, what you use for reporting, anywhere between 1 and 1.2. What you don't realize is what happens if you cross the line of 1. Okay? If your number's less than 1, you're overestimating your leakage. If it's over 1, you're underestimating your leakage. Okay? So I'm going to keep going back to this number. It's a very, very important number. This is something that you can do. This is what we've called, this is still in development. It's an infrastructure condition index, not a factor. That's looking at the health of a DMA in total. And giving you an idea of where your infrastructure is in terms of health. Very, very high level. Okay, it's not meant to replace detailed modeling, whatever the case is, but it gives you a relative idea of what to do. So do you have to stick with ALC? Can I extend it to maybe looking at kind of street length, block length, and then looking towards your different replacement levels. Still in development, but it's possible to get those numbers. You'll be able to predict pretty accurately. Okay, your minimum or your maximum recoverable leakage. You'll be able to prioritize based on the outcome. Okay, where do you send your ALC crews? Where do you do pressure management? Where do you start your smart metering? So you won't be able to prioritize your actions, implement. So do what you need to do, get the numbers, and then come through, complete your route back to reporting. So when you go back to Ofwat, you're going to be reporting on accurate figures. So I'm just going to go through just a couple of my shots just to show you kind of ideas of what happens. DMA, we all know about metadata. We have flow profiles, pressure profiles. That's all standard. That's all comes from a DR. We can look at a whole lot of profiles. We can normalize them. We can throw them on top of each other. We can take into account seasonal variations, Ramadan, all those type of things. You can select seasons, whatever the case is. But you want an aggregated mean, okay, at different times of the year, which will give you a number or a baseline to work with. Okay. You can then, I think there's a slide missing here. Anyway, okay. What you can do with the N1 test is you can get this number. So if you look in the middle, the little arrow box, you'll see a number, little red square there. That test is telling you what's happening with your leakage in the DMA. Okay, in this particular case, the leakage is tending towards variable area leakage. So the pie chart there will show you it's predominantly variable area leakage in the zone. If it's variable area leakage, we know it'll be more prone to respond to pressure management, not to ALC. Okay, if it was the other way around, and we had more fixed area leakage, we would know the DMA would respond more to ALC and less to pressure management. Okay, that's the first thing we get out of this. The two profiles on the bottom there. The one on the right, you can't see that well, but basically, if you measure your DR correctly, which is the top blue line, okay, you have your measured consumption. It's really easy to work out your unmeasured consumption that you can apply across the DMA, and then you can break down your leakage, a little bit small to see, but you can break down your leakage types to see what you're dealing with, which will go right down to UARL, UBL. You can look at where you are in terms of progress. So a little turquoisey bar in the middle at the top there would be the maximum recoverable leakage that you could get, and you could plot your progress. Okay, so in this particular case, this is plotting your leakage reduction against the regulatory target and against your maximum recoverable, what you could do. So you can check to see where you are. So anything else interesting under this one? Okay, top right-hand side, you can't probably read that, okay? There's something called a system correction factor that we're now applying to the old UARL equation. So this correction factor is now adjusting for what we thought was the minimum achievable leakage. And this is now delving into the world of UBL. Okay, so we're now going back down. And we found a very, very good correlation between using a system correction factor and UBL calculated three ways. So there's the UK version, there's the international version, and there's another version we're playing with. up to about 1,000 connections in a DMA. There's a really, really good correlation using this method. And that takes into account, I think Jeremy mentioned it earlier, we might have a couple of unseen larger problems than lots of little ones. Okay, so sometimes we can get this skew, okay, what we call a Poisson distribution in terms of what's happening in terms of the leakage and background, so we take that into account. But that factor we use adjusts downwards. So it's moving more and more and more down towards UBL. Okay, and that's obviously will become your maximum recoverable leakage. Prediction curves. Once you've got this N1 and you know what type of leakage you have, really easy to start playing with them. Okay, so you have a leakage curve, the one at the top is your total leakage, the lines underneath will be your fixed area leakage, variable area leakage, and your unavoidable leakage. And you start at a certain point, which is your current leakage, and at the top left there you'll see nothing, okay, apart from your leakage value. If you start playing with the pressure, okay, so if I move to there, okay, I'll start populating what to do. Okay, so to get from where I was to that point, on the left-hand side, it will tell me drop the pressure by so many meters, okay, and you have to go and find and fix X number of equivalent service pipe bursts. So ESPBs, hopefully you're familiar with, but it works on that basis. Drop the pressure by this, go and find and fix so many breaks or bursts to get to that number. And you can just keep going down as long as you want, and those numbers keep changing. Okay, you can set a percentage reduction if you want. You can do 15%, more, whatever the case is. It'll tell you what you need to do. You might have a pressure constraint where you can't drop below a certain value, no matter what it is there. But that's kind of once you've mapped leakage behavior, it's easy to play with it and to see what's possible. So once you've got that, you can look at kind of tabulating the information if you want for a whole lot of DMAs. You can filter them or prioritize them to total leakage. So if you want to know your total leakage in the DMA, which ones to go to first in terms of total, easy to prioritize. This one here is pressure management. So if you want to look at pressure management as your driving force, you can prioritize by PM, you can prioritize by ALC, whatever pops out, you can prioritize by CSL, you can prioritize by burst frequency. There's a whole lot of things you can do. Okay, you can even prioritize by PCC, which I didn't put in here. But PCC you can map using the same principles. So it's not difficult to build the curves. And then you can show heat maps of what's going on. So you can look at it visually and just see where to focus your attention on different things. So in terms of insight, the last couple of slides, quantify your leakage reduction achievable from pressure reduction, how many equivalent leaks you need to go and look for. Okay, so that's your ESPBs, just an indication, doesn't mean you have to go and find exactly 55 leaks. Okay, it could be 12 big ones or larger ones, it's just indicative. You can estimate customer side leakage, okay, which is an iteration until equilibrium, or even for unmetered connections. Okay, there's a little algorithm that we're running that even for unmeasured or unmetered connections, you have a pretty good indication of what your CSL is. Look at the condition of your network. You can come up with a very high level overview saying, we're good, we're not too good, but importantly, we can split it. Okay? Is the problem on the mains or is the problem on the service connections? And then the big thing, resource. Okay? So your resource management, and we kind of stick with the 4 R's when we do in our case. So it's basically sending the right people to do the right thing in the right place in the right order. Okay, so don't just do blanket and hope for the best. So we're trying to get away from machine gun. We're looking for sniping out of this. So just to the last slide, there's Ofwat's kind of with the adaptive pathway to get into the lowest leakage levels by 2050. There's what we do now on the left-hand side. We're jumping along in leaps and bounds in terms of innovation to move forward to try and meet those targets. You've got our sustaining innovation, you've got our breakthrough innovation that's happening, but sometimes we have to look forwards to go, look backwards to go forwards. Okay, let's go back and revisit the fundamentals. Let's look what they're actually telling us so we can move forward. So then one, the product there, but quotes, I also like quotes at the end. Okay, this is somebody I've actually met, funny enough, a guy called Naveen Jain, who says success doesn't necessarily come from breakthrough innovation, but from flawless execution. I'm going to take back, Michael, you might not even remember this, but you had a quote that he mentioned in one of his talks before, is we need to be brilliant at the basics. Okay, that's the message there. And then the last one, I think Tim's spoke on this one. You go to Ofwat. Okay, that's Mark Twain. Okay, get your facts straight, or get your facts first, then you can distort them as you please. Okay, but Ofwat didn't hear that. But it is possible just to relook at the basics, revisit them, understand what they're telling you. Okay, and you can move forward. Okay? It's indicative, it's high level, but it can tell you exactly what to do where very, very quickly.
Super. Thank you very much indeed. Right. I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions that have come in on Slido. So this is a good one about N1. I didn't know what N1 was. I was one of the people who didn't put their hands up, but I do know the difference between a jet engine and a turbocharger. So I got that one. So how does your model cope with the calculation anomaly that flow or time modulation can cause a flip with how N1 impacts estimates of leakage?
Yeah, so the key message there is what's been kind of carried forward to date is N1 is a fixed number. It's not. It's a variable number. So as pressure changes in a DMA, your N1 is constantly changing. So if you're doing any type of control, whether it's time or flow modulated, you're changing the pressure profile in your DMA. The N1 is not the same value throughout that pressure profile. It's variable, and it's changing the whole time. So that can be mapped. We can predict the curves for that quite easily to do that. So that overcomes the kind of accommodating control.
Excellent. Well, I hope whoever asked that question understood the answer, because it left me, but that's probably why I'm not a leakage practitioner, but thank you for that. So how often would you need to repeat the 45-minute pressure test? I get the question there. I understand that one.
Okay. So the answer is depends. Okay. So depends on the purpose. So if you're using it for performance monitoring, you would do it more often. If you're doing it for reporting, you'll use it less often. It's often good to do it at least twice, maybe 3 times. So you want a summer and a winter, and possibly a Ramadan. You want to look at 3 specific instances. You could then do it probably quarterly would be the ideal way of doing it, and it's just to check what's actually happening. If DMAs don't change in configuration, you can probably do it less. If your smart metering increases, you can probably do it more. But it really depends on the purpose.
Thank you. So any questions from the audience? In the front.
So this is very interesting because we've heard about more and more data and sub-second data, and you've gone completely the other end, aren't you? You're saying less data. So just wanted to kind of understand a bit more what you did in Cape Town when you said you did nothing for 3 weeks. So am I to guess that actually you were doing lots of these drop tests, these pressure tests, sorry, and you were working out which DMAs would benefit from pressure management and which wouldn't, and which would have ALC and which wouldn't, and also how did it compare to ALC? So you saved 52 megs, I think, doing pressure reductions. What did ALC do in Cape Town?
Okay, so ultimately we got 73 MLD, ultimately, and that was a mix of PM and ALC. Topography was a big thing for us in soil conditions. So we had a lot of sandy soil conditions. So leak detection was quite difficult. So we had that as a constraint. Eventually, 73 MLD, strong bias towards PM in terms of what we did. But through those tests, we spent 3 weeks of doing literally hundreds and hundreds of tests just to understand what the leakage was. And then once we knew what it was, we knew how to prioritize and tackle it.
Super. Any last question from the audience? No. No more on Slido. Thank you very much indeed. Cool. A round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're heading to lunch. Do make the most of the lunch break. It is a decent lunch break. Let's try desperately to get above the 5 post-it notes on the thought board. And just to remind you, is there anything that needs to be unlocked or changed to help the industry achieve its goal of 50% reduction in leakage by 2050? What are the pinch points or pain points that might be blocking progress, and what's working well? what needs to be shared and replicated. You don't even have to answer all three. Just answer one of them. This would be progress, because we are going to reflect on them at the end. But also do take we've got a decent lunch break, so do take the chance, an opportunity to network, catch up with colleagues, do visit the exhibitors, the exhibition stands, talk to those PhD students, and also to Pete Felton from the National Robotarium, who gave the talk last night. And do fill in your evaluation forms, because you're always telling me about that. Fill in the evaluation forms, because we do take note of that. So we'll regroup. We've got to pay attention to this. Regroup 2:30 sharp for the last session, which is a big focus on resilience. So have a good break. Thank you.